My darlings, I see you, all of you. 12 signs, and 1 month in which the sky does something for love that it does not often do. I want to begin by showing you the architecture, because once you see it, you will understand why I have built this reading the way I have, and why 4 signs in particular are receiving something. There are 2 dates in August, not 1, 2, and they are 2 days apart, and the gap between them is the whole subject of tonight. On the 15th of August, Mercury conjoins Jupiter at 10 degrees of Leo. Mercury is the planet of the message. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of more, of the thing being larger than expected. They meet exactly, in the same sign, 3 days after a total solar eclipse has torn that sign open. That is the message. And then on the 17th, 2 days later, Venus at 10 degrees of Libra forms a sextile to Jupiter at 10 degrees of Leo. Venus, in her own sign, at full strength, in easy conversation with the largest planet in the solar system. That is the feeling. My darlings, they are not on the same day. The message arrives on the 15th, and how you actually feel about it does not resolve until the 17th, and I am going to tell you at the end of this reading exactly what to do with those 48 hours, because it is the single most useful piece of guidance I have to offer this month, and almost nobody is going to mention it. I will say now what to listen for, so you can work it out before I say it. As I go through each of the 4 signs, I mention both dates, every time. If you notice the pattern, you will very likely arrive at the ending on your own, and that is a better way to receive it than being told. The 4 signs are Libra, Pisces, Gemini, and Leo, and each of you receives a completely different kind of message, arriving through a completely different part of your life. I am Madame Aurora, 35 years studying the stars from my office in Manhattan, and before I go to Libra, let me give you the shape of the month, because there are several dates that matter, and I would rather you wrote them down than tried to remember them. August opens with the kindest transit of the year. On the 6th, Venus enters Libra. Venus rules Libra. She is in her own home, at full strength, unimpeded, and she stays there until the 10th of September. My darlings, whatever else happens this month, that is running underneath all of it. Relationships soften. Difficult conversations go better than they should. People are more willing to be reasonable. If you have something delicate to repair with a person, the whole of August is favorable, and the first 11 days especially. Around the 9th, Mercury joins the Sun in Leo, and communication takes on warmth, and a certain amount of performance. On the 11th, Mars enters Cancer, where it is not comfortable. Mars in Cancer does not pursue, it protects. And that changes the character of desire for the rest of the month, from wanting toward defending, which for love matters a great deal, and which I will explain sign by sign. Then the 12th. A total solar eclipse at 20 degrees and 8 minutes of Leo, at 47 minutes past 5 in the evening universal time, which is 1:45 in the afternoon Eastern, and 10:45 in the morning Pacific. The Sun, the Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter all in Leo on the day the light goes out at midday. And it sits on the South Node, which is the point of release and completion rather than beginning, and I want you to hold that detail because it changes what returns this month and what it returns for. On the 15th, Mercury conjunct Jupiter, the message. On the 17th, Venus sextile Jupiter, the feeling. And on the same day, Mars in Cancer squares Neptune, which is the foggiest aspect of the month and which I would not schedule anything demanding around. So the 17th carries both the loveliest aspect in August and the least reliable one, and you should expect the day to feel emotionally clear and practically useless, which is an unusual combination and a real one. On the 22nd, the Sun conjoins the South Node at the last degree of Leo and Virgo season begins. On the 25th, Mercury does the same. Those 2 dates close the Leo chapter. On the 27th, Mercury cazimi at 4 degrees of Virgo, which is the clearest thinking day of the entire month. And on the 27th into the 28th, depending on where you are, a partial lunar eclipse at 4 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces. The full moon, and the second eclipse of the month, on a completely different axis, which is why the end of August feels nothing at all like the middle. The 6th, the 11th, the 12th, the 15th, the 17th, the 22nd, the 27th, the 28th. Write them down. And before I go to the signs, let me say one thing about how eclipses actually behave in love, because a great deal of nonsense is spoken about them, and I would rather you had the accurate version. An eclipse is not a day. That is the first and most important thing. People treat the 12th of August as an event that occurs and is then finished, and that is not how they work. An eclipse opens a corridor, and the effects unfold over roughly 6 months as later transits cross the same degree and reactivate it. What happens on the day itself is frequently small, or ambiguous, or nothing at all. So, if the 12th passes quietly for you, my darlings, do not conclude that you were skipped. A great many of the most consequential eclipses in the lives of my clients passed without incident on the day and revealed themselves 11 weeks later. The second thing is that eclipses do not negotiate. Ordinary transits present options. Eclipses present outcomes. Whatever has been half decided, half ended, or half avoided in the area an eclipse touches tends to get decided, ended, or arrived at, whether or not anybody was ready. In love, that is worth knowing in advance, because it means August is unlikely to leave an ambiguous situation exactly as ambiguous as it found it. And the third thing is that eclipses are personal by degree. This one perfects at 20 degrees of Leo, which means anybody with a planet or an angle between roughly 15 and 25 degrees of the fixed signs, Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio, receives it far more directly than anybody else. If you know your chart, look there. Now let us begin. Let us go to Libra. My darling Libra, you are not primarily receiving the message this month. You are the reason it is being sent. I want to open with that because it is genuinely unusual and because your sign will otherwise spend the whole of August waiting for something to arrive, while the actual transit is happening to you rather than toward you. On the 6th of August, Venus enters your sign. Venus is your ruler. She is coming home, to her own domain, in your first house, the house of your body and your presence, and how you appear to people before you have said anything, and she stays there for over a month. My darlings, there is no better placement in the entire zodiac for being found attractive. Not attractive in the narrow sense. Attractive in the literal one, the sense of attracting. For the whole of August you are more magnetic than you have been in a year, and the reason is not that you have changed. It is that your ruler is standing in your first house at full strength, and other people are simply reading you differently. And here is the practical consequence, and I want you to actually take it in. Things you say in August land better than the same things said in June. Requests are more likely to be granted. Photographs come out better, which sounds trivial and is not, because your sign will discount the whole month if it cannot find evidence. Attention arrives from directions you were not expecting. Now, where does the message come from for you? The eclipse on the 12th and the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction on the 15th both fall in your 11th house, the house of friendships, groups, communities, networks, and the wider social field. So for you, my darling, the romantic message does not arrive from a stranger, and it does not arrive from a lover. It arrives through the circle. For some of you, that is literal. A friend of a friend. Somebody in a group you belong to, who has been in the periphery of your social life for some time without ever being central, and who says something in the middle of August that reframes the entire acquaintance. For some, it is a friendship that changes register. Somebody you have known for years, comfortably, in a defined category, and in the middle of this month, the category stops holding. This is the most common form of an 11th house eclipse in love, and it is the one that arrives with the most confusion attached, because there is no clean moment when it changed. For some, it is online, or through a community rather than a person. Your sign is the natural inhabitant of the 11th house's opposite pole, and this month puts the emphasis firmly on the group, and a considerable number of Libran messages in August will arrive through a channel involving many people rather than two. And for some of you, it is the recognition that a group you belong to no longer suits you, and the freedom that follows. The card I pulled for you is the Page of Wands. A young figure in a patterned tunic standing in a desert landscape, holding a tall staff with a single green leaf sprouting from it, looking up at the top of it with an expression of interest rather than certainty. He is a messenger, and he carries fire rather than water, which matters. This is not a message of settled devotion. It is a message of spark, of interest declared, tentatively, by somebody who is not entirely sure what they are declaring, and the sprouting leaf tells you it is at the very beginning and has not yet become anything. And the age of the figure is not literal, my darling, before your sign begins doing arithmetic. The page is a stage rather than a person. What it says is that whatever arrives is early, and unformed, and should not be assessed by what it is on the day it appears. Your 2 dates. The 15th is when it is said. The 17th is when Venus, from your own first house, reaches across to Jupiter, and you find out how you actually feel about it. Notice that the second one is happening in you rather than to you. Now let me split this, because a love reading that treats everybody as unattached is useless to half the people watching. If you are partnered, my darling Libra, Venus in your first house for over a month does something specific and rather lovely to a long relationship. It makes you visible again to somebody who has stopped looking, not because they stopped caring, but because familiarity does what familiarity does. A great many Libran partners will notice something in August without being able to name it. And the 11th house emphasis means the setting that helps you most is social rather than private. Go out together, with other people, into a room. Your sign repairs better in company than across a kitchen table, which is unusual and which is worth knowing about yourself. If you are unattached, the 11th house is telling you plainly where to spend your August. Not on applications and not on strangers. On the circle you already have and the edges of it. Accept the invitation you would normally decline. Go to the thing that is slightly inconvenient. Libran eclipse messages in August arrive through the second and third ring of an existing social field, and that field cannot deliver anything if you are not standing in it. And one practical note for your sign, because Libra needs it more than any other. Do not decide what you think by watching their face. Your sign reads other people so fluently and so automatically that you frequently adopt their position before you have located your own, and Venus in your first house this month is asking you, specifically and unusually, to consult yourself first. Now, before I move to Pisces, let me pause for a moment. Actually, first, do something with me. It will take 20 seconds and it works whatever your sign. Think of the situation this reading has been sitting on top of. Whatever came to mind in the first 2 minutes. Do not refine it. Now answer one question. Are you waiting for information or are you waiting for a decision? Those feel identical and they are not. Waiting for information means there is something you genuinely do not know, and when you know it, the situation resolves. Waiting for a decision means you already have everything you need and are waiting to feel able to act on it. Most people, when they are honest, are in the second one and have been describing themselves as being in the first. Hold your answer. It will matter a great deal at the end of this video. And if what I have said about Libra is landing, for you or for somebody you love, tap that little like button below this video. It is a small gesture and it does something real, which is tell YouTube to carry this to more people who are about to receive something in the middle of August and have no idea it is coming. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is the moment, because we have 3 signs left and the last one is standing directly underneath the eclipse. Now let me speak to Pisces. My darling Pisces, your message arrives through the ordinary, and then, at the very end of the month, the whole thing turns and lands on you personally. Your August has 2 completely separate halves, and I want to take them in order. The eclipse on the 12th and the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction on the 15th both fall in your 6th house, the house of daily work, routine, health, service, and the unglamorous repeated business of an ordinary week. Now, that is not a romantic house. It is the least romantic house in the chart, and I can hear a portion of you already deciding that this means nothing is happening for you. My darling, listen to me. The 6th house is where a very great number of real relationships actually begin, and the reason is that it is the house of repeated proximity. Not a party, not an app. The same person, in the same context, week after week, until something that has been quietly accumulating becomes visible to both parties at once. So for you, the message in the middle of August arrives from somebody who is already in your daily life. For some of you, that is a colleague, and I will say plainly that a great many 6th house eclipse messages arrive from a work context, and that this brings complications with it that your sign should think about carefully rather than mystically. For some, it is somebody at the place you go regularly, the class, the gym, the practice, the appointment, the walk you take at the same time, somebody whose face you know and whose name you may not. For some, it is a person connected to health or care in some way, either professionally or because you have been going through something and they have been near it. And for some of you, it is not a new person at all. It is an existing relationship in which the daily texture changes. Somebody starts doing something small and practical for you, repeatedly, without announcing it, and the message is in the pattern rather than in any sentence. I want to add one thing that is specific to your sign and specific to this month, and it is a caution rather than a promise. Mars entered Cancer on the 11th and sits in your 5th house of romance for the rest of August, which is genuinely the most desire-driven placement any of tonight's 4 signs receive. And on the 17th, Mars squares Neptune, and Neptune is your ruler. My darling, that combination on that day is the single most idealization-prone aspect in the month, in the sign most prone to idealization, in the house of romance. I am not telling you nothing is real. I am telling you that the 17th of August is the one day this month when your sign should not finalize an assessment of anybody, because the instrument will be reading high. And Venus, meanwhile, from the 6th onward, is in your 8th house. The house of intimacy, depth, shared resources, and the things 2 people hold privately between them. That is a serious placement, my darling. Venus in the 8th is not flirtation. It is the deepening of something that already has substance, and for those of you in long partnerships, this is one of the better transits of your year for a genuine reopening of intimacy that has become procedural. And then the end of the month. On the 27th into the 28th, the partial lunar eclipse perfects at 4 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces. Your own sign. Your 1st house. That is your event, my darling, and it is considerably more personal than the eclipse in the middle of the month. A 1st house lunar eclipse brings something to a head in you, rather than in your circumstances, and it is a full moon, which means culmination rather than beginning. If you were born in the first 10 days of March, roughly the first week and a half of your sign, that eclipse is close to exact on your sun, and you will feel it more sharply than anybody else watching this video. For love specifically, what a 1st house eclipse does is force a position. Something you have been holding in a state of gentle indeterminacy becomes something you have to be clear about, and your sign is the least fond of clarity of all 12, not from dishonesty, but because your sign genuinely experiences several things as true at once. Let me split this for you as well. If you are partnered, the 8th house Venus is the headline, and it is a genuinely good one. Venus in the 8th deepens what already exists rather than introducing anything. And for a long partnership that has become efficient and slightly transactional, August offers a reopening. The route is not romance in the ordinary sense. It is disclosure. Something told that has not been told in the first half of the month while Venus is unimpeded. If you are unattached, the 6th house is your instruction, and it is unglamorous, and I would follow it anyway. Go to the same place at the same time repeatedly, whatever it is. Your sign's romantic pattern historically favors intensity arriving suddenly, and the 6th house offers the opposite, which is the slow accumulation of familiarity, and which your sign has spent decades overlooking in favor of things that felt more like weather. The card I pulled for you is the King of Pentacles, an enthroned figure in a robe embroidered with vines, one hand resting on a coin, a bull carved into the throne, and a garden growing thickly around him. He is the most solid figure in the deck. Not the most exciting, and I want to say that plainly because it is the reason he appeared for you. What is arriving for Pisces this month, if it arrives, is not glamorous. It is somebody or something with weight, practical, established, unhurried, and considerably more reliable than the version your sign tends to be drawn toward. And I would ask you to notice, before dismissing him as dull, that his garden is the most abundant image in the entire deck. Everything around him is growing. That is what steadiness produces over time, and your sign has spent a good deal of its life mistaking intensity for depth and being disappointed by the difference. Your 2 dates. The 15th is the message, the 17th is the feeling, and for you, the 17th is also the fog, which means your sign has to be more careful with those 48 hours than anybody else tonight. Now let me speak to Gemini. My darling Gemini, of the 4 signs tonight, yours is the most literal. The eclipse on the 12th falls in your 3rd house. Mercury, your ruling planet, conjoins Jupiter there on the 15th. And the 3rd house is the house of messages. Words, communication, the immediate environment, and the entire apparatus by which what is inside one person reaches another. So when I say a romantic message is arriving, for you I mean it in the plainest possible sense. Something will be said, or written, or sent. And meanwhile, Venus, from the 6th of August, is at full strength in your 5th house, the house of romance, pleasure, creativity, and play. My darlings, look at the geometry of that. Venus, the planet of love, at maximum power in your house of romance. And on the 17th, she forms a sextile to Jupiter in your house of messages. Love in easy conversation with words, on a chart where words are the ruling function. There is no sign in the zodiac better configured for a romantic message in August than yours. Let me be concrete about what it looks like. For some of you, it is the reply, something you sent, or said, or half said, that has been sitting in silence long enough that you had stopped watching for it. Eclipses in the 3rd house have a particular tendency to release messages that were composed and never sent, and there are more of those in the world than anybody imagines. For some, it is a person from your immediate environment. The 3rd house is neighbors, the local, the short journey, the people you see because of where you are, rather than because you chose them. A considerable number of Gemini messages in August will come from someone geographically close. For some, it is somebody who has been reading or listening for longer than you knew. Your sign transmits constantly, and people receive it silently for years, and the 3rd house eclipse is exactly the configuration under which one of them finally says so. And for some of you, it is a sibling or a close friend delivering information about somebody else, which is a very 3rd house way for love to arrive, and which your sign should not dismiss simply because it is second-hand. Let me split this for you too. If you are partnered, Venus at full strength in your 5th house is the single best transit of your year for putting play back into a relationship that has become logistics. Your sign does not lose interest in people, my darling. It loses interest in repetition, and a long partnership that has stopped generating new conversation will register to a Gemini as a loss of feeling when it is actually a loss of novelty. August fixes that more easily than any other month this year. Do something impractical together in the first half. If you are unattached, the 3rd house eclipse means you should be talking rather than looking. Your sign's connections form through exchange, not through appearance or circumstance, and the whole of your August energy sits in the medium of words. Reply to things. Start conversations that have no purpose. The romantic message in your case is considerably more likely to develop out of an ordinary conversation than to arrive as a declaration. The card I pulled for you is the Lovers. And I want to be careful with this one, because everybody sees that card and hears romance, and that is the shallow reading, and it is not why it appeared. Look at the image. 2 figures, a figure above them with arms outstretched, and behind them 2 trees, one bearing fruit and one bearing flame. The card sits at position 6 in the major arcana, and its traditional meaning is not romance at all. It is choice. The Lovers is the card of a decision between 2 things that cannot both be had, made at a level deeper than reasoning, in which what you choose reveals what you actually value. It appears in a love reading frequently, and it is almost never saying you will be loved. It is saying you will have to choose. My darling Gemini, that is precisely your risk this month, and I would be doing you no favors by leaving it out. Your sign under conditions of abundance does not choose. It keeps everything open, because keeping everything open is more interesting, and because closing an option feels like a small death to a mutable air sign. August is going to present you with more than one thing at once. The card is telling you that the month is not testing whether you are wanted. It is testing whether you will decide. Your 2 dates. The 15th is Mercury, your own ruler, meeting Jupiter in your message house, which is the most literal reading in this entire video. The 17th is Venus, from your romance house, telling you what it is worth. And I will say for your sign what I will say again at the end. Your sign will want to answer on the 15th. Within the hour, probably, and brilliantly. Pause with me for a moment, my darlings, because we have one sign left and it is the one standing directly underneath all of this. If this is bringing you something, tap that like button. It genuinely does something, which is tell YouTube this matters to real people and carry it to somebody who is going to receive something in the middle of August without any warning. And leave me a comment now rather than at the end, because I want to ask for something specific and I would rather you answered before you know why. Tell me your sign, and tell me which of the 2 dates you think is yours, the 15th or the 17th. Do not reason it out. Say which one you felt something about when I mentioned it, because I have named both of them 4 times now, and one of them has been landing differently for you. Now let me speak to Leo. My darling Leo, everything I have described tonight is happening in your sign. The eclipse on the 12th is at 20 degrees of Leo, in your first house, with the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter all gathered there. The Mercury-Jupiter conjunction on the 15th is in your first house. This is not a transit that reaches you. It is a transit that occurs on you. And for love specifically, the placement that matters most is a different one, and it is beautiful, and almost nobody will mention it. Venus, from the 6th of August, is in your third house, your house of communication, of messages. My darling, Venus at full strength, in her own sign, sitting in your message house for the entire month. That is love in the position of speech. For the whole of August, the words available to you are warmer than the words you usually have, and the words arriving toward you are warmer than usual as well. And on the 17th, Venus in your third house sextiles Jupiter in your first. A loving message, from the house of messages, reaching directly to your own person. Of the 4 signs tonight, that is the most direct geometry of the lot. Now, here is what makes yours different from the other 3, and it is the South Node. The eclipse on the 12th is on the South Node, and the South Node is currently in your sign, and the South Node is the point of the past, of what has already been carried, of completion rather than commencement. So for you, my darling, the message in August has a considerable chance of coming from somebody who is already in your history. For some of you, that is an ex, somebody who ended things, or who you ended things with, whose name you had stopped expecting to see. For some, it is an almost, a relationship that never quite became one, that had no ending because it never had a beginning, and which has therefore never been closed by anything. For some, it is a person from a much earlier chapter entirely, not a romance at the time, somebody from a period of your life you consider finished. And for some of you, it is not a person returning, but a truth surfacing, something you did not know at the time about why something ended, arriving now, years late, and rearranging the memory. Let me split this for you as well, because the South Node emphasis makes your 2 situations very different. If you are partnered, the eclipse in your first house is not primarily about a returning person, and I would not want you spending August braced for one. It is about you changing, and a change in you is a change in the reference point a long relationship has been measured against. Your partner will feel something before they can describe it. Venus in your third house all month gives you unusually warm language, and I would use it, because the risk in a first house eclipse is that you become clearer about yourself and communicate none of it. If you are unattached, everything I am about to say about the South Node applies to you in full, and the discernment I am going to ask for is the whole of your August. The card I pulled for you is the Devil, and I want you to stay with me, because the popular reading of that card is wrong, and the correct reading is the single most useful thing I can give a Leo this month. Look at the image properly. A horned figure on a block, and beneath it 2 human figures, chained by the neck. And the chains are loose. That is the entire card. The loops around their necks are wide enough to lift off over their heads, and neither figure is doing so, and neither is looking up to notice. The Devil is not the card of evil, and it is not the card of a bad person arriving in your life. It is the card of a bond that is maintained voluntarily by somebody who has stopped checking whether it is locked. It is the card of the pattern you would step out of the moment you looked at it directly, and have not looked at directly in some years. My darling Leo, that is exactly the right card for a South Node love return, and here is what it is telling you. Something is coming back this month. That much I believe. And the question is not whether you still have feelings, because you almost certainly do, and feelings are not the issue and never were. The question is whether what returns is a person or a pattern, because a South Node return is not the universe restoring something to you. The South Node is the releasing end of the axis. Things that come back across it come back to be completed, which sometimes means resumed and considerably more often means finished properly, by 2 people who are now able to do it in a way they could not the first time. And I want to be honest rather than romantic about this, because your sign deserves honesty. If what returns is a pattern, you will know within about 2 weeks, because it will feel precisely like it felt before, in the specific way that was difficult. And that recognition is not a failure. It is the closure arriving in the only form closure ever actually arrives in, which is direct evidence rather than an explanation. Let me give you a test, because I have just told you to distinguish a person from a pattern, and it would be lazy of me to leave you without a method. There are 3 questions, and you can answer all of them in about a minute. The first: does the version of them that has made contact know anything they did not know before? Not about you. About themselves. A person who has moved has something new they can articulate about what went wrong, and it is usually specific and slightly unflattering to them. A pattern arrives with the same account it had at the end, sometimes better phrased. If the explanation you receive is the explanation you already had, my darling, nothing has changed except the interval. The second: what are you being asked for? Notice the shape of the request rather than its warmth. A person offers something. A pattern requests something, usually access, usually gradually, and usually framed as though it were being offered. This one is difficult because a pattern is not being dishonest. It genuinely experiences itself as offering. And the third, which is the most reliable of the 3. In their company or in the exchange, are you more yourself or less? Your sign has an extremely accurate instrument for this and has generally chosen not to consult it. A person makes you more. You are funnier, plainer, more relaxed, less managed. A pattern makes you slightly less. Careful. Editing. Aware of how a sentence will land before you finish it. My darling Leo, that third question will tell you within one conversation what the other 2 take weeks to establish, and your sign will know the answer instantly and will want to overrule it. Do not overrule it. The devil's chains are loose, and the only reason they hold is that nobody in that picture is looking up. Now the rest of your month. Mars entered Cancer on the 11th and sits in your 12th house for the remainder of August, which is the least energetic placement Mars occupies in any chart. Expect to be more tired than the month appears to justify, and expect some of your reactions to arrive delayed by a day or 2 rather than immediately, which is unusual for your sign and which will confuse you. And the lunar eclipse on the 27th into the 28th falls in your 8th house of intimacy and the things 2 people hold privately between them. Something concludes there at the end of the month, and it will be quieter and more private than anything else that happens to you in August. Your 2 dates. The 15th is when it is said, with your own first house lit up by 4 bodies. And the 17th is when Venus, sitting in your house of words, tells you what those words are actually worth to you. And of the 4 signs tonight, my darling, you are the one for whom the gap between those 2 dates matters most, and I am going to explain why in about 4 minutes. Now, my darlings, let me speak to the 8 signs I have not named tonight, because Venus is in her own sign for the whole of August and that touches every chart in the zodiac, and I do not believe in a love reading that addresses a third of you and leaves everybody else outside. Aries. Venus in Libra sits in your 7th house of partnership, directly opposite your own sign, and it is the strongest partnership transit of your year. If you are attached, August is unusually favorable for repair. If you are not, the 7th house is where relationships are formed rather than admired, and the eclipse in your 5th house of romance on the 12th gives it something to work with. Watch the 31st, when Jupiter trines Saturn in your own sign. Taurus. Venus is your ruler as well, and she is in her own sign in your 6th house, which means love arrives for you this month through the ordinary and the practical rather than the dramatic. Somebody does something useful for you, repeatedly. The eclipse falls in your 4th house of home and family, so a good portion of Taurian love news in August is domestic rather than romantic, and no less significant for that. Cancer. Mars enters your own sign on the 11th and stays for the rest of the month, which gives you more drive and more directness than you have had in about 2 years. Use it in the second half. Venus in your 4th house makes home unusually warm. The eclipse in your 2nd house of money is the more consequential event, and it is not romantic. And I would rather tell you that than invent something. Virgo. The eclipse falls in your 12th house, which means the first 3 weeks are invisible by design, and something is assembling where you cannot see it. Your date is the 27th, the Mercury cazimi in your own sign, which is the clearest day of your year, and the lunar eclipse on the 28th in your 7th house of partnership lands the day after. Those 2 together are your August, and the middle of the month is not. Scorpio. Venus in your 12th house is quiet, private, and rather beautiful, and it favors the thing you have not told anybody. The eclipse falls in your 10th house of career, which is where most of your August energy actually sits. For love, watch the end of the month. Sagittarius. Venus in your 11th house of friendship and community, and the eclipse in your 9th house, your own natural house. Sagittarian love in August arrives at a distance or through a shared interest rather than proximity. Somebody from another place, another field, or another world entirely. Capricorn. Venus in your 10th house of career and public standing, which is not the placement anybody wants to hear about in a love reading, and which produces a specific and very Capricornian pattern. Somebody is attracted to your competence. Notice whether that pleases you or disappoints you, because the answer tells you something you have been avoiding. Aquarius. You are standing directly opposite this entire eclipse. The eclipse in Leo lands in your 7th house of partnership, which makes you, along with Leo, the most personally affected sign in the zodiac this month. And it means whatever is happening in a one-to-one relationship rather than anywhere else. Venus in your 9th house softens it. The 12th of August is a significant date for you, and almost nobody will tell you so. Now, my darlings, let me give you the thing I have been saving. But before I do, I want to say something to those of you for whom nothing is going to arrive in the middle of August, because that will be true of a good number of people watching this, and it would be dishonest to build an hour on a promise and then not address it. Some of you will reach the 18th of August and nothing will have happened. I want to be plain about that rather than leaving you to discover it and conclude that the reading failed or that you did. Not every eclipse delivers an event to every person in the affected sign, and anybody who tells you otherwise is describing a system that does not exist. But I would ask you to hold two things. The first is what I said about eclipses at the beginning. They open corridors rather than producing days. If the middle of August is quiet for you, the more likely reading is not that nothing is happening, but that yours arrives later in the 6 months this eclipse governs, and a considerable number of the significant developments I have traced back to an eclipse in 35 years occurred in the 3rd or 4th month, rather than the first week. And the second is that the 2-line exercise I am about to give you works whether or not anybody sends you anything, and in some ways works better if they do not, because the gap between what is and what you want it to mean is easiest to see when nothing has arrived to complicate it. Now let me tell you about Marguerite, because the principle I am about to give you will land better with a shape attached. Marguerite was a client of mine, a Libra, who came to me some years ago after a period of silence with somebody had ended. He had written to her, at length, after 14 months of nothing, and she had answered within about 20 minutes. She came to me 3 weeks later, not because it had gone badly, but because she could not understand her own state. She said, "I got exactly what I had wanted for over a year, and I feel worse than I did during the silence, and I cannot explain that to anybody without sounding ungrateful." I asked her what she had written back. She could not remember precisely, which was itself the answer. She remembered the feeling of writing it, which she described as flooding, and she remembered that it had been long. And then she said the sentence I have quoted ever since. She said, "I answered the 14 months. I did not answer the letter." My darlings, that is the whole mechanism in 7 words. The reply she sent was a response to the accumulated weight of everything she had felt during the silence. And the letter she had actually received was a considerably smaller and more tentative object than that. She had answered a year of her own interior with a document he had no context for, and he had, understandably, retreated, and the retreat had confirmed every fear the silence had built. She was not foolish, she was fast, and in that particular window, fast and foolish produce identical outcomes. Now, here is the thing itself. I have named 2 dates in every section tonight, the 15th and the 17th, 4 signs, 8 mentions, and I told you at the beginning to listen for the pattern. Here it is. Do not answer on the 15th. That is the whole of it, and let me explain why, because the reasoning is what makes it usable rather than a superstition. On the 15th, Mercury meets Jupiter. Mercury is the planet of the message, and Jupiter is the planet of expansion. And what that combination produces in a human being is not clarity. It is enlargement. The message arrives, and it immediately seems bigger than it is. More is read into it than was put into it. The implications multiply. The future assembles itself in about 90 seconds. That is a Mercury-Jupiter event, and it is why the 15th will feel like the most exciting day of your month. But excitement is not information about worth. It is information about size, and Jupiter makes everything larger regardless of what it is. 2 days later, on the 17th, Venus reaches Jupiter from her own sign. Venus is the planet of value, not romance, which is the popular shorthand, value. What things are actually worth, what they cost, and whether the two match. That is her function in every chart she has ever appeared in. So the 17th is the day you find out what it is worth to you, as opposed to how large it seemed. My darlings, they are 2 days apart on purpose, and almost every person who receives something in the middle of August is going to answer on the 15th from the enlargement, and then spend the 17th reading their own reply back with a slightly sinking feeling. I have watched this exact sequence for 35 years, and it is not a moral failing. The first response to a long-awaited message is never a position. It is relief, or excitement, or vindication, and all three arrive fast and none of them is considered. So here is the instruction, and it is very simple. Receive on the 15th. Reply on the 17th or after. And now let me connect this to the question I asked you earlier, because it was not idle. I asked whether you were waiting for information or waiting for a decision. If you answered information, then the 15th is genuinely your date, because something you do not currently know may well arrive, and the 2 days that follow are for weighing it. But if you answered decision, my darlings, and a great many of you did, then I want to be direct with you. No message arriving on the 15th is going to make the decision for you. That is not what a message does. It will change how the decision feels for about 72 hours, and then you will be standing exactly where you were standing, holding the same choice, with slightly more information and no more resolve. That is the honest reading of this month for a considerable number of people watching, and I would rather give it to you now than let you spend 2 weeks waiting for an external event to relieve you of an internal task. Venus in Libra for the whole of August is the most favorable condition of the year for making that kind of decision well. Not for having it made for you, for making it. If something arrives on the 15th, read it, and acknowledge it briefly if silence would be unkind, and say nothing substantive. Then let the 16th pass, and answer from the 17th onward, when Venus has arrived, and you can tell the difference between a thing that is large and a thing that is valuable. And I will add one caution about the 17th itself, because I promised honesty. Mars squares Neptune on the same day. It is a genuinely foggy aspect, and it particularly affects judgment about effort and energy. So use the 17th to feel, and the 18th to act, if you can manage the extra day, and my Pisces darlings in particular should take that extra day, rather than treating it as optional. Now let me give you something small to do, my darlings, and it takes 10 minutes and works for all 12 signs. On the evening of the 15th, whatever has or has not arrived, write 2 lines in a notebook. The first line is what was said, plainly, factually, the actual words if there were words, or the actual event if there was not. Strip out every implication, just what occurred. The second line is what you want it to mean. 2 separate lines, deliberately, because on the 15th, those 2 things will feel like one thing and they are not, and separating them on paper is the single most useful act available to you that day. Then close the notebook and do not reread it until the 17th. On the 17th, open it and read both lines again, and notice how far apart they are. For some of you, they will be very close, and that is genuine, and you should proceed with some confidence. For others, the gap will be considerable, and that gap is not a disappointment, my darlings. It is information you would otherwise have discovered in about 4 months at considerably greater expense. And if nothing arrives at all on the 15th, which will be true for a good number of you, write the 2 lines anyway about whatever is currently occupying you in this area, because the exercise is not about the message. It is about the difference between what is and what you want it to mean, and that difference is running underneath every relationship any of us have. My darlings, before I let you go, 3 small things. 1. If any part of this reading gave you something tonight, if you worked out the 2 dates before I explained them, if the mechanism for your sign made the month clearer than it was an hour ago, tap that like button. It is the simplest way to tell YouTube to carry this to somebody who is going to receive something in the middle of August and answer it in the first 4 minutes. 2. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because I will be back before the 12th with the eclipse week breakdown, and again after the 28th for the Pisces lunar eclipse, which almost nobody is going to cover properly. If you become a member of this channel, readings reach you before they are published, and you and I actually speak in the comments, because I read member comments first, and I answer there more often and more personally than I am able to anywhere else. 3. And this is the one I care about most. If you have not commented yet, tell me your sign and which of the two dates felt like yours, the 15th or the 17th. And if you already commented earlier, go back and add one word underneath it. Just one. Waiting. I read every single comment, truly, and I want to tell you why I am asking for something so small. Because on the 18th of August, a considerable number of you are going to come back to this comment section, and you are going to find your own line from 2 weeks earlier, and you will know by then which of the two dates it actually was. That is worth more than anything I can tell you from behind a desk tonight. And if this reading gave you something and you ever want to say thank you more directly, a super thanks is never expected and always felt, and it is a genuine part of how I keep making these readings as carefully as I make them. If you know a Libra, a Pisces, a Gemini, or a Leo who has been half watching their phone lately without admitting it, send this to them tonight. You may not realize how much a single share matters. It is how this work finds the person who needs it. Thank you, my darlings. This community has become something I genuinely did not expect when I began. The 6th, the 12th, the 15th, the 17th, the 28th, write them down. And one last date, which I have not dwelt on, and which is the quiet one. On the 31st, Jupiter at 13 degrees of Leo forms a trine to Saturn in Aries. Expansion in agreement with structure, on the final day of the month. I mention it at the end deliberately, because it is the least dramatic aspect in August, and it is the one that determines whether anything that happened in the middle of the month survives into the autumn. Jupiter opens. Saturn keeps. A trine between them is the sky's way of asking whether the thing that arrived is going to be given a shape. So if something does reach you this month, my darlings, look at the 31st as the real assessment rather than the 15th. 19 days after the message, on the last day of August, you will know whether it is becoming anything. Not because of the aspect. Because 19 days is how long it takes for a thing to show you what it is. And the sky has simply put a marker there. Libra. You are the reason it is being sent, and it comes through the circle. Pisces. It comes through the ordinary, and the end of the month belongs to you. Gemini, yours is the most literal message in the zodiac this August, and the only question is whether you will choose. And Leo, my darling, something is coming back across the south node, and the question is not whether you still feel it. It is whether what returns is a person or a pattern. The message arrives on the 15th. What it is worth arrives on the 17th. Do not answer in between. I am Madame Aurora from Manhattan, and I love you, all 12 signs of the zodiac. I will see you before the eclipse.